distant skies, firefight calls, the stakes are high. On the flame heroes and spies, control fire, where strategy lies. Hear the tales, fierce and deep, victors roar, defeated weep. We blaze a way, we don't hold back, control fire, ready to attack.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Fire Episode 3. I'm joined by Sam.
Hello.
And Mike.
Hello.
And of course I'm Luke, and today we are talking about Marauders. This is the first of our series of faction reviews, and we chose to do the Marauders because both Sam and I play Marauders and Mike has played against the Marauders. So the format for these army review episodes is going to be a little bit different to our normal episodes. We're going to start with the preamble that you all know and love, and finish off with the cringy outros that you all know and love, but in the middle it's a little bit different. So it's going to be longer than our usual episodes, just by necessity. We're going to start by talking through the faction in general, then go into the orders, some quick reviews of all of the units. We're not going to go into depth of all of the stats because that is boredom. And then after that, we're going to go into a sample list that each of us have prepared and talk about sort of how we intend to play that list and its strengths and weaknesses. So without further ado, Mike, from the Forge, what have you been working on?
I guess some of the people who've seen the Firefight Fanatics page, I've been working on my enforcers, which I affectionately call Team America, or Team America actually. They're all red, white and blue. Pretty much got that now to about 1,500 points reasonably comfortably, so it lets me field most things around, and starting to work on some Night Stalkers, so that's my next army off the list.
Lovely. For myself, I've been looking at building a new Maison force, so because I already played Plague, I figured that I've already got a third of the army already painted there, because I've got so much spare Dreadball stuff, just teams that I've accrued over Kickstarter. I've got about another third of an army there with Reanimation Division, and a whole bunch of the coaches make really sweet character pieces, so I've got the other third there. I've now brought in some GCPS and mooshed the three of those together. I had my first game with the Maison a couple of weeks ago, and I've just that's what's on my hobby table at the moment. It's all Maison. How about you, Luke?
Excellent, sounds cool. So in the most topical of endeavours, I'm working on more Marauders. So I've also finished up painting my Dead Zone terrain. So I took that to a game day that Mike hosted, and that was awesome to play some Dead Zone. And thanks to my ever-growing collection of Marauders, I was able to field several different kinds of Dead Zone lists just from my Firefight army. So that was pretty fun. All right, so into the review proper. What have you guys got to say about the Marauder faction?
I'm very excited that we get a chance to do this as our first faction review. The Marauders were my first ever Warpath army. I got them back in the old Fate of the Forge Star box set, which just had some of the old, what are now called Gorons, and some of the Raptors, and I split them with a mate, and he took the Forge Fathers, and I bundled all my orcs into those Raptors, charged them straight at the Forge Fathers, and they all died. So that was my introduction to Warpath and to Marauders, but it's been uphill from there, which is great.
Excellent. And Mike?
It's quite heartwarming to hear that your Marauders died to Forge Fathers. I enjoyed that part of the story, thank you very much.
Down to the cockles.
I guess this, look, like the Greenskins are one of the Tolkien-esque versions of most fantasy games, and they're in nearly every one, but it's good to see, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, the change, I guess, from that to that Mantic spin on the particular race. And I enjoy playing it across the table, and that's what we'll hopefully bring here.
Well, in fact, my Marauders aren't green skin at all. I've got a nice zesty purple skin tone to my Marauders. Looking forward to diving into the Marauders. I bought the two-player starter when I got into Firefight, the Enforcers and Marauders, and sort of wreaked a bit of havoc with the Enforcers accidentally. I thought these guys will be quick to paint, so I just kind of really slapped out those Enforcers and thought, I'll play these while I paint my Marauders up. And it turns out that last edition Enforcers were a little bit too good, and sort of, wreaked a bit of havoc with them. Now that Command Protocols is out and my Marauder army is up to scratch, I'm playing them all the time now, and as luck would have it, in my opinion,
It's nice to hear you're always ahead of the curve.
in my opinion, they are probably the top faction. So that worked out really, really, really nicely. So yeah, keen to get in and talk about what makes the Marauders the Marauders. So in that vein, Sam, do you want to maybe take us through the lore as the resident lore expert here?
I'm not sure I'll take the title, but I'll certainly dive into it. Mike, I love how you were saying it is sort of the spin on the Tolkien-esque orc, and I love what Mantic have done with it in that these orcs aren't stupid. They're not charging straight at the enemy going wag. These Marauders are the galaxy's best mercenaries. They are simple and direct. But simple doesn't mean stupid, and direct doesn't mean uncreative. They are very blunt instruments, and they know that the quickest way to do something is a straight line through it. The orcs themselves, or the Marauders, are native to Gora, which has a number of related species. There's orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, and hulks, which have been explored, a lot of it through Dreadball. The entire race artificially rose to prominence as a threat to justify the increasing authority of the Council of Seven. That initiative kind of ran out of control. They overran their containment and rampaged across the spheres. It was originally supposed to be a sort of, we'll bring up the enforcers to deal with this threat. Oh, it's a threat we can no longer contain. But eventually they did by setting a star going nova, and that was the Mandrake Rebellion. And since then, there have been enforcers tasked with hunting down any Marauder warband which is potentially growing a little bit too big, and then they get culled. And so they are a group of mercenaries which are never allowed to get too big anymore at the behest of the Council. In terms of why they fight, these are not fighters for honor or for the glories of their race. They are fighting primarily for money. If you are a corporation and you have money to spend, you can hire the Marauders and they will get the job done with very few questions asked. Probably the main question asked is, how much are you willing to spend? Those are the Marauders.
Excellent. In fact, they have a couple of faction orders in that vein, like the no questions asked. So speaking of which, Mike, can I impress upon you to take us through the orders, please?
Sure. All right. So, as we mentioned before, Gora was the main planet system that they came from in the first place. And the first one is it's a 1-point order that says Gora endures. The unit gains 1 AP on trademark weapons when performing shoot or steady actions, which can be boosted, and you get Way to Fire 1 and Vicious Shoot. How do you guys use this particular order?
It's great, and I would expect to be triggering it once per turn, because I will generally pick which unit is going to be having that order going this turn, and it's just a straight firepower buff of just all good stuff for 1 or 2 command if you particularly want it. It's just great. Luke?
Yeah, that's right. So this order is the reason why I like to take at least 1 large unit of commandos. Even if they've got a special weapon in there, you're at least getting sort of that buff to 9 commando shooting. Every turn is pretty much on the money, I think. There's almost no reason why you wouldn't want to be using this, and at 1 point, it's just a bargain.
It's also worth noting that the boosted version that's going to be giving you Way to Fire doesn't just apply to the trademark weapons. And so if you want to be giving yourself some extra hits with those missile launchers in your commando squads, or you just need an extra hit from an HMG in order to pin, you can certainly be doing this order in order to give the Way to Fire and get the rerolls onto those weapons.
Yeah, excellent with the HMG to ensure that hit for the pinning. And also, missile launcher, Way to Fire and Vicious. Tasty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can also be used on vehicles, the boosted version.
Yeah, how interesting. You can actually just give Way to Fire to a vehicle, and that can be a vehicle with blast or devastating weapons for some real force multipliers. What an interesting idea. I hadn't even clocked that.
Oh, I hadn't either, but let me make some notes.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you coming to the Marauders with fresh eyes.
Yeah, well, okay.
What's our next order, mate?
So the next one comes down to simple rule calls, no questions asked. Now, this one actually can't be used on vehicles. but it increases the unit's sprint value by 3 inches, and all assault weapons gain AP1.
Yeah, so I mean, it's at its most efficient for non-dedicated assault units because, I mean, your brawlers aren't going to be getting any benefit from that AP boost. They've already got AP1. But if you're planning on doing a charge with your commandos, because they're no slouches in combat as well, this gets them up to almost brawler status. It gives them the AP1. They miss out on the vicious and the assault 4+, but you know they're still 2 attacks each. It's not terrible. I mean, and also just as a 3-inch boost to brawlers, if it gets them in charge range, of course you're going to.
Yeah, like this one, it's like a fixer in a pinch. You know, if you really need it, then it's there and you can use it, which is totally fine for an order to be. But really, I think this one's cool because it's the threat of the order is kind of worse than the order itself, because now they have to take into account, what if he uses the extra 3-inch charges? You know, how much more damage is that going to be if he decides to go into me with those commandos? So it kind of works better against opponents that know the list and know the orders, because they're probably going to try to play around the order a bit more than you're even going to try and use it.
And possibly also then a little bit of counterplay with trying to, you only get that order once, of course, and so then trying to lure out the use of that order, that means it then shortens the threat range of some of your other stuff. I was thinking of a similar order over in Maison, which can give you an extra 6 inches on a charge, right? And that meant that people are staying 18 inches away from your aberration. Yeah. So it's a similar sort of thing here. It's something that, until it's been triggered, you have to play around it.
Or 18 inches from more beasts.
We'll come to that, shall we?
And the Enforcers have got a similar order, but obviously on their shooting. But I think you guys might be discounting the value of the AP1 a little bit. I realise there are other units in the army that has it, but at a pinch it can come through and do what you need it to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably speaks to the quality of a lot of the units in the Marauder list, that the ones you'd want to be getting into combat already have AP1. Mm-hmm. But even there are still some units that don't have AP1 you really don't mind tossing it into, because they're still not terrible in combat. Commandos and skyscrapers.
Yep.
Shotgun skyscrapers, of course. So.
Yes.
All right, what's next?
Going on the mercenary line, the next rule, or next order I should say, is called Every Penny Counts, which is following a blaze away action, this unit may immediately perform a free second blaze away action against the same target or another one that is within 9 inches of the original target, provided it is in range and line of sight. I'm not sure how many times I've ever used Blaze Away in other armies. How often have you used it in Marauders?
You play Shoot 4 armies though, and so you tend not to Blaze Away so frequently.
Yeah, not too often. For me, this would be a great order if you weren't already probably running HMGs in the unit that's going to use it. You know, you're just always better. If you've got an HMG, you're always better off using the HMG and the regular shoot. So it's very low utility. I think, you know, if you're running a flamethrower and you're out of range of the flamethrower and you really want to, you know, try and pin twice because that's going to be super important to you, know, like against Night Stalkers, for example, then yeah. But, you know, I think this is a very low use. Maybe 1 in every 4 or 5 games you might actually use it.
I mean, I guess in some ways it also depends on the amount of negative modifiers that are stacked onto the unit you want to be shooting at, because Blaze Away caps at 8s, and so you may as well add an extra dice onto each of those shots in order to, if you're already at enough negative anyway. I guess I'm thinking particularly Night Stalkers in cover and yada, yada, yada. I was expressing, I know, Mike, to you a little earlier, that I find it a little bit of an odd headcanon that things like HMGs and these autocannons that have pinning don't actually have Blaze Away.
Yeah.
That these are the rapid firing multi-shot weapons. Can't possibly blaze away with them though. That's only for these rifles. It's and considering that Blaze Away only adds 1d, it doesn't double the shots. It just adds 1 extra dice. I don't know if it'd be too much of a problem if HMGs and so on had Blaze Away. In which case I'd certainly use this order more.
And you'd think like, but we don't like to have these rules on special weapons, right? Because that special weapon could be added to another vehicle or another unit that you sort of don't want to be able to blaze away. But it's an HMG, so it can pin anyway, and that's the point of Blaze Away, right? So I don't think HMGs having Blaze Away would take anything from anywhere, and it kind of makes thematic sense.
But in terms of using this order, I mean, I don't know if I ever have. A free action is nice. If you're blazing away, why not do it twice? But I guess, as you say, your HMG just does it better and you get all the shots in.
Yeah, I was being pretty generous with my maybe once in every 4 or 5 games, as in maybe if you don't have answers to all the things you need answers for, you might use it every now and again. But I try to have answers already in the list that don't require a blaze away or at least not this unit to blaze, these units to blaze away. So I don't think I've ever used it either.
All right, I guess we're up to Extreme Violence, which is a 2-point order, and this is restricted to command and specialist units only. And the unit gains Vicious Assault and an additional +1 AP to its assault weapons during a charge action.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great order, but it does have a very limited number of targets which are going to benefit from it. There are some good targets in command, things like the Brawler Captain and the Marauder Warlord would benefit from this.
I mean, despite being a fantastic name and an order that I really want to use, just because of that, I think, it is excellent on units like Skyscrapers and Marauder Warlords, but, post-command protocols, I used to run both of those, pre-command protocols, but they don't really have a place in my lists at the moment, so I haven't used it. But yeah, running decent-sized units of Brawler commanders and Warlord commanders and Skyscrapers, good order if you're running those. But do they even need this?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I mentioned there aren't good specialist options really that benefit from it too much. But command options, you're probably going to be triggering their command order rather than this. Like, if I had the option to go Extreme Violence or Green Rage, I'm picking Green Rage.
Green Rage every time. But the Brawler Captain, you can trigger his order and then also use a faction order on himself, as long as he's not benefiting from his command order in the same turn that he's using a command order. A faction order. So, maybe you can use it there as well. The Brawler Captain's order is very situational anyway, so this might be a better option regardless. But yeah, I mean, Skyscrapers are, they're advanced training, so it's kind of, it feels like it's built for them. Mm-hmm. So that if you're running Skyscrapers, great order. If you're not, probably don't bother.
Alrighty, then we're on to another 2-point order of Can't Miss. A unit can carry out a shoot or a steady aim action at a target within 12 inches with a shoot value of 4. And boosted, which like a +1, it can then make the unit do a shoot or a steady aim action at a target within 6 inches with a shoot value of 3. Alrighty.
Oh, I tend not to trigger this one too much. I mean, I don't think it's great on commandos. You're effectively paying to command in order to give yourself +1 to hit, and that's not great. It's okay on Brawlers because then it's dropping them down from 6s to 4s. That's pretty good, and they're probably going to be in close anyway. That said, you're probably assaulting. If you're that close with Brawlers. I mean, maybe shotgun Skyscrapers because they want to get in nice and close for that extra dice from knockback, but I don't run Skyscrapers in that way, so I haven't pulled that off.
I actually use this order a lot.
Really?
Probably because, as we'll see when we get to lists, I tend to have a lot of command points available to me. My commanders don't tend to die that easily, so they stick around, and I have a fair weight of command dice in my lists. So I have the points to spare. I don't often use them on Brawlers. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever used them on Brawlers because they are trying to do other things usually. Mm-hmm. But I've used this on Commandos even just to give them a +1 quite a bit. I
mean, I guess if you're flush with command, then why?
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to be having quite a few commando units in terms of the way you list build, probably.
Exactly, yeah. Didn't used to, but just with the progressive scoring and sort of the changes to Assault, I am running more Commandos now. And they're moving forward. So they're often getting within that 12-inch range. I don't think I've ever hit the sweet 6-inch shoot, but I'm waiting for the day because it's going to be glorious. But yeah, no, just, a +1 to hit. It's a +1 to hit.
Yeah, I just think it's an expensive one, but like I said, if you're already flush with command points, why not?
Well, you don't need to save dice for unpinning, so we'll get to why later. So, And also, the way I play Marauders, I don't tend to double activate a lot unless I really need to. So, what else am I spending points on? When you've got 12 command points to spend and you don't need them for unpinning and you're not doing many double activates, may as well.
I can see it can be used to, it's probably a corner case scenario, but if you do get charged and then after you've won that combat, they're not going to be that far apart. So you could go in and then smash somebody with shooting with commandos, etc., or whatever it is before moving in to assault them afterwards. You could do some serious damage, but I said it's pretty corner case in that regard.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one to pull off because if you do, to potentially survive and win a combat, you probably need to use your charge reaction, which means you activate it anyway.
All right, up the last of the standard orders or faction orders is explosive rounds. The unit gains blast D2 on all its anti-tank weapons when targeting a unit in a building or wholly within a difficult area or difficult terrain with a height of 2 or more.
I do find this a bit of a weird one. There's so many things that need to align in order for this order to be a valid. It needs to be an AT weapon, and it needs to be firing at a unit that's either in a building or in sufficient cover. We know that for most vehicles, that aside from walkers and so on, that they're generally not able to enter that kind of difficult terrain, and they're certainly not going in the buildings. So that means you're going to be firing an anti-tank weapon at something which is probably not a tank, but it's inside a building, and that's when this order triggers. I love, even though it's explosive rounds, I love this on Ripper Maulers charging a unit in a building or a unit in cover. It doesn't specify its shooting attacks, and they have AP lots anti-tank weapons. If they charge an infantry unit in cover or in a building, you absolutely pop this on them and make all those lovely attacks blast D2.
Yeah, that's tasty. But I love this order on my tank busting stunt bot because someone's gonna try and hide in a building or in a piece of difficult terrain, and it's got the range to reach out. It's both the weapons, even I call it the good gun and the bad gun because one's AP lots and one's AP 1. But both of them have anti-tank. So you're getting blast on those. And, blast devastating is, it's a double up, right? So...
multiplying a multiplier?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not always, giving me really good returns, but again, I'm flush with points. Someone's sitting in terrain or a building. I may as well throw 1 point onto the stunt bot to maybe dish out a bit of extra damage. And at that point, it's really good at converting something that's, devastating anti-tank into a bit more of an anti-troop option because now you've got the blast instead of the devastating, or, if you're super lucky, then you get the then you're shooting the multi-wound models like enforcers hiding in a building, and you've got blast and devastating, which is just chef's kiss.
You can't half tell that Sam does not play either Forge Fathers or Enforcers for it to be saying that this order is not crash hot because it just cuts through.
I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that it has a lot of things that. It has to have something at the aggressor's end, it has to have these keywords, and it has to have something at the defender's end in terms of their tabletop positioning in order to actually fire it.
Yeah, I think against those particular armies, this one starts to really cut. It's those two, which happen to be the faction that I usually play. But anyhow,
that is interesting, though.
Mike did quote unquote hide a unit in a building for not very long. I tend to take a couple of shooting anti-tank guns, right? So people always like to hide in terrain, and particularly with the 24-inch shooting on the stunt bot, steady aim is a very real thing that you can use for pretty much the entire game. So you're not suffering from the cover from them hiding in the terrain or the building, and you just it's just gravy on top for 1 point. It's great. So that rounds out the faction orders, and we're going to move on to talking about the individual units. Now, we're not going to do a full stat breakdown. Feel free to whip out your companion and follow along at home if you need to know the stats. We'll call out stats if it's relevant to the topic, but we're not going to go through ad infinitum. So we're going to start with the commanders, and the first commander on the list is the Brawler Captain for 50 points. What do you think about him, Sam?
I think he's a great example of a cheap commander. He's bringing a black command dice to the table, which is always nice. It's probably worth calling out his order because I think there's sometimes some misapprehension around the way this works. So for the Brawler Captain's order, closing fire, it's 2 commands. So when declaring a charge, all friendly non-vehicle units within 6 inches may first take a shoot action against the unit being charged. Now I know that there is some thought that this is, I charge and then all units within 6 inches can shoot. No, it's an aura of 6 inches. And then when a unit within that aura radius charges, it gets a free shoot action.
Yeah, I misread this the first time. I think the red herring is the word all. But yeah.
All non-vehicle, yeah.
Yeah.
I can absolutely understand. I would love to see, and this is maybe for a future thing, for when command auras are named, maybe it's aura brackets number, and then that just tells us the radius of the aura. It saves us less words in the description, and that means we don't have untidy words here leading to things. But I still think in terms of an order, it's a good one. I mean, it maybe gives a reason to toss flamethrowers onto brawlers. That if you're thinking you're going to trigger this, you get a free shot on the way in. You wouldn't go quite that far.
Yeah, I mean, I've run the Brawler Captain a fair few times because he is dirt cheap, and once you kit him out with a few powers, he's a mini brawler unit. So and not so mini brawler unit
without the unit strength, but yeah.
So he's good, but I've tried so hard to pull off this order, but the ranges and where he needs to be and where the other units are, it never seems to come off for me. So I'd love to use it, but I've failed, even though I've actively tried.
Maybe because it's only a 6-inch aura, so it makes it a little bit hard for to be in that bubble at the commencement of the charge.
Yeah, and also ranges of where your brawlers, for example, have to be able to utilize the order when they're charging in. It just kind of never really sort of pans out.
Is that because you're charging out of mules?
No. Well, I mean, sometimes, yeah. Not always. Sometimes someone shoots my mules. But other than the order, I think he's great. His budget. I've actually taken to sometimes running him just by himself and just hiding him behind a mule, and the mule moves up and he runs up behind it. And he just takes cover.
Yeah.
He's cool.
Now I know you love the Commando Captain.
He's excellent. He's so good. He's verging on broken. So the Commando Captain, he's 70 points plus whatever retinue you take. And he's the only way in Marauders to get Goblin Snipers, which is a little bit of a shame. But this is a way to get just a little bit of sniping in there. Now, his order is for the money, and it's a 1-point order, which makes no sense to me.
It's very cheap.
So
for an 18-inch aura.
Yeah, so his aura is 18 inches, and units within that 18-inch bubble do not get pin markers when hit by pinning weapons. Now, it's really important to note this doesn't include anti-tank weapons that pin vehicles because they don't have the pinning keyword. Mm-hmm. It's just guns like an HMG that has the pinning keyword.
So it wouldn't work against Blaze Away, it wouldn't work against losing combats, you're forced back and pinned. So you can still gain pin markers, just not from pinning weapons.
Yeah, plenty of ways to get pin markers that aren't pinning weapons, but the main way you get pinning markers is pinning weapons. Interesting note, I guess, that if you're playing Marauders on Marauders, maybe Double Blaze Away is better than an HMG.
Well, there's a point.
That's there you go. That's in there for the mirror match. But it's excellent because when you measure out the 36-inch circle that this guy radiates, I'll when I go through lists later, I'll talk about how I use him in that list. But yeah, it's a massive bubble and it's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I love him just because, for a start, he's bringing an orange command die, which is great. Yep. And also, I have so many Goblin Sniper models that I've accrued over the years. Having to take a Commando Captain in order to take two, I would love to see a Goblin Sniper unit in the future. But in the interim, this is the way I can actually get Sniper units on the field. So I generally will take at least one Commando Captain for that reason.
Yeah, and I've always taken the snipers, but they've been so ridiculously underwhelming for me that I'm just considering taking commandos. It's the same points for the full commando squad. But yeah, the snipers just seem to do absolutely nothing for me.
I don't disagree.
2 dice, it's not much. If it's like that YOLO, sometimes it'll work. But I think in multiple games they've not done a wound.
I think their potential is generally stronger than their actual, as in they could be removing a special weapon within a squad or taking off a drone. Like, I don't always see the utility of that. They could be doing a lot of stuff. They generally don't, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to run them in something like, say Night Stalkers, right, against Spectres that have a special weapon in all the units, you can take a steady aim, you can shoot on 4s with sniper scope and steady aim against the Night Stalkers. Obviously 5s if they're in cover as well. 2 shots on 4s with AP2, Night Stalkers are low armor.
You remove a model you pin.
Probably going to stick. Yeah, pin them, remove a special weapon. I think they have the potential to be great. They just never seem to be great for me.
Can I also then say they would actually be good against the commando captain because they would be able to get through that anti-pinning aura?
True. Well, they can just snipe the captain off.
You can't remove a unit leader with snipers.
No, true.
All right. Well, shall we run on to the Ripper Warlord? I think this guy's fine. I mean, he's worth considering with a Rainmaker escort instead of a Rainmaker unit. I mean, it drops a bit of unit strength, but gets some command dice and an extra command bubble on the pitch, which is not terrible. They have similar firepower. I mean, you drop a little bit of the damage output as well. Any thoughts on him and his command?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think he's all right. I think he's excellent. I take 2. So the command. This is there's 2 great reasons. Like you said, he's a mini Rainmaker unit. The shooting is pretty great. They're very resilient. They put out a lot of hurt. But the order is kind of, it's like this catch-all. So off the back of the commando captain, where you've got this bubble of most of your stuff doesn't pin me, but sometimes some things do pin me. Well, then you've got this guy to come along and remove those pin markers. So his order is that 2 units can remove a pin marker. So within 12, two units can remove a pin marker and hit the dirt. Now, it doesn't specify that it can't be a vehicle that can remove a pin marker. So if someone's shooting you a stunt bot with anti-tank weapons, you can just remove pin markers off that. Same with Hornets. You can remove it off a unit that's either been out of the bubble for some reason, or somehow become pinned even within the bubble. So there's lots of utility to this order, and it's as you need it. So,
as solid as a contract.
As solid as a contract, indeed. And yeah, like you're shooting, I like to sort of not push these guys out. I like to sort of give target priority to different units so that these guys are mostly left alone and can sort of come in and clean things up later in the game. And
he brings twin black command dice to the table, which I think is actually slightly better than a single orange. Rerolls aside, and that changes it up a little bit, but I think the ceiling's higher on twin black.
I must admit, I like the no-brainer of if a black shows empty, you re-roll it. When you've got the better dice and it rolls a 1 and you're like, ooh, do I re-roll it?
Well, that's easy on green because there's only a single 1 and there's no blank. So yes, if it is it is a green. But I appreciate for
oranges.
Actually, it is worth saying. If you don't have anything else to re-roll, yes, you can re-roll a 1 on an orange because I think there's only a single blank face and 2 faces which are 2.
Yeah.
So your odds are you're going to be better, but
it's just the worst feeling rolling a 1 into a none.
Yeah. Alrighty, Marauder Warlord. I certainly take this guy. I love his order, Green Rage, an aura 12 inches to give Frenzy 3. It improves the combat of everyone around him. The thing I particularly like about him is he's armor 6, and the brawlers that you take along as his bodyguard, with the mixed armor rules, you pick the highest armor in the squad. And so those brawlers suddenly also jump up to armor 6, resilient 1. And suddenly you've got a very, very tough brawler squad running around with a very large orc. I really enjoy my Marauder Warlord.
And he's not bulky, so he can go into a mule.
He always does.
And that's how I used to run him. I did love him pre-command protocols. His order and then the ability to run up in a fleet of mules with other units was excellent.
Maybe a herd of mules?
Flock. So, Yeah, I used to run him pre-Command Protocols. I haven't since then, just because I think the Ripper Warlords are just that much better. And with the changes to, you know, how the vehicles work with commanders, it kind of is a bit more janky to run him off the field. I do like him. Love the model. I've got one, the newer model. I've got one of the older ones too, the metal chunky boy with the funny hat.
I think I have 4 of them.
But the new one's excellent, and I run him as a Ripper Warlord just because I love the model.
All right, shall we come on to what is probably the most unloved of the Marauder commands, the Raider command vehicle?
I don't know that it's so much unloved, just not necessary most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes down to its order, which is Heavy Metal Rampage. All friendly units with the Walker keyword within 12 inches increase their speed by 3 and 3. So 3 on advance, 3 on sprint, and gain the Sure-Footed keyword. Sure-Footed, I think, is they already have Walker, which means they're already ignoring obstacles. So it basically means that you're also ignoring terrain as well. So you're not getting all the utility out of that. But an extra 3 inches is not bad. But I guess it only applies to 2 other units in the army, and that's your grunt bots and your stunt bots. So if you're running grunt bots and stunt bots, I mean, there's an excellent case to be made for taking a Raider. It brings a green command dice and has very inspiring. That's both great.
And shoot 4.
It is shoot 4, but I mean, all you can really take on it is the missile launcher 2D AP2. It's I don't.
But that's the anti-tank and anti-aircraft variety.
Oh sure, but I mean it's not the same as Propagators or Canis, which are shoot 4 and you give them a laser cannon, and then suddenly they're 3 dice AP3 anti-tank. That's great. 2 dice AP2 at range. Oh, and the laser cannon's 36, missile launcher 24. I mean, sure, shoot 4 is fine. I just wish it had a better gun for that shoot 4. And it's the green dice and the very inspiring is great. It just has an order which only applies to a couple of units.
Yeah, and like you say, there's only the 2 units that the order works on, but I would argue, and we'll get to these units a bit later, that it turns them from something I would be unlikely to take to a build that I would take those units in. So the stunt bots, obviously, I take a shooty one, but I'm talking more the melee one. All right, shall we move on to troops? Sam, do you want to maybe take us into... we won't talk about the commandos and brawlers separately. I think we should probably just talk about them together and when you would favour one over the other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a lot that are very similar between them. They're both unit strength 2. They've got similar unit sizes, similar costs and similar stat lines. The commandos are 5 across the block pretty well, whereas brawlers get a slight decrease on their shoot and an increase on their attacks and gain vicious and AP1. I will say brawlers are very good in melee for a troop unit. For the points, they certainly dish out a lot of hurt. They're not the fastest of units, they're the standard 612, but when they get in there, and with some Ripper Claw upgrades, when they hit hard.
They hit real hard.
Whereas commandos are, I think, about as, with 5s across the board, are about as run-of-the-mill as you can get. They all have Resilient 1, which is kind of the thing you see across all the Marauder infantry. They're all Resilient 1. But because they're 5s, it means they're pretty average all round, but with 2 attacks. So they can charge in and hit you over the head with that rifle at a pinch.
Yeah, and I kind of like the fact that with this unit, if you can ever not remember the stat that you can't remember is a 5. You know, and then you go, oh, but what about brawlers? They're different, and it's just the +1 -1 to the fight and shoot.
Yeah,
it's as easy as that.
And some changes on the weapons, absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably a great thing to mention about them is their Overwhelm 7, which is not a hard number to hit. So you can take units of 8, and they're unit strength 3, and those units aren't terribly expensive. They're great board holders. In the early game, defense 5, even with Resilient 1, does melt pretty quickly, but they can be very good objective holders in the early game.
Yeah, that's the thing about I guess Marauder infantry in general. Mike posed the question, what don't they do well? And I think living is probably probably the thing they don't do too well. Obviously, resilience is a bit of a bump to that, and very thematic and on point from a theme perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the armor 5, 1 hit point really does mean that they die quite easily. So, the way to succeed with commandos and brawlers is more about like when you allow your opponent to either fight them or shoot at them. There's a lot of being coy about hiding, sticking things in mules, but not letting the mule come out until it's ready, so that they can't, kill the mule and then shoot the unit as it's sitting there pinned and activated. So you spend a lot of time keeping just out of certain weapon ranges, keeping behind cover, keeping in cover, and playing around, not dying, because that is the thing that they do very well. The other things they do very well, obviously, is, everything else, as Mike would say. So they shoot quite well, they fight very, very well. They are a very good unit, and I'm kind of happy to have either of them. I used to run a lot of brawlers, but that's... when I could blow them
when they just stream out of your herd of mules straight into the enemy line.
20-something inch charge range, plus more with orders. Now I tend to just sort of run 2 small units in mules and call it a day for the brawlers. And then the commandos is really the mainstay of my force now. A few special weapons, large unit sizes to capitalise on orders, hold objectives, unit strength 3 when they're big. So...
It's interesting you mentioned the brawlers in mules. I tend to run more, I won't say large units, but more moderate sized units of brawlers and just run them with the idea that they've probably got bigger targets to be firing at than the brawlers, by and large.
People love shooting brawlers.
They do. Hopefully, I'm giving them other things to worry about. But I mean, it is true, because they do die somewhat easily, and it's not like they're Veermen or GCPS and there's plenty more where they came from.
Yeah.
Because they're certainly not a horde army. Their base units are 10 points for a standard commando. That's not a cheap unit. It's not an expensive one. It's not an enforcer or a steel warrior. But for a 1 wound defense 5 model that don't regenerate back onto the field.
Yeah. There's no healing. There's no regen. No way to get models back in this list. Once they're dead, they're dead. No questions asked.
You spend all that effort into killing them, right? So,
I'm just trying to think, as I said, I don't play the army, so I'm kind of going, well, besides Asterian's forces and steel warriors, what don't they die less against than anything else? The only other thing you could possibly say there's a regen on plague. But then generally the plague's got less armour. So,
but a whole lot more bodies. Plague and Veermen have numbers as their resilience.
It's easy to build a 100 wound Marauder list. Easy.
Is that the list you've done for our end of the episode?
Yeah, and that wasn't even trying.
One cheeky trick with brawlers, if you're like me and the default is however many brawlers you're having, that's how many Ripper Claws you've got, because that's an incredible upgrade.
You upgrade them all with Ripper Claws?
Well, that's where I start. But then what I do is I go, I need 5 or 10 points for this over here, and then I drop 1 or 2 back to claws. And the reason why I'm comfortable doing 1 or 2 is because if you're not wounded at all, and you get into a unit, the loss of those couple of attacks doesn't matter, because you've got so many attacks that you're decimating whatever you're hitting anyway.
I'm reducing my massive overkill.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're not necessary from that perspective. Those last couple, but if someone puts wounds on the unit first, you take off the claws, because they're the ones that have less damage output. So you've just spent 5 points less for that wound that you're taking off than what you otherwise would.
I don't start with full and then take off. I generally go, I probably am not going to upgrade more than half of the models to have Ripper Claws, and probably less than that, because I'm assuming that I'm losing some on the way in. And as you say, there's only so much I want to be overkilling when they get in anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also coming from the perspective of my brawlers go in mules, right?
Yeah.
So they're usually hitting for a turn without being wounded. If you're running 10 person squads of brawlers across the table, you're going to lose a lot of them before they get in, and that's their downside. So yeah, I'd only probably go 3 or 4 Ripper Claws at that point.
I think I think a comment was made a little earlier. That generally, I think while they start off at a similar base cost, you would normally put in extra commandos to bump that up to the unit strength 3, or you're going to give the brawlers the mule. So it works out to still be around about the same cost for those 2 units. So the brawlers then get that speed that they need to be able to get up the table to do what they want to do, or you've got something that's sitting there at US 3 that can hold an objective reasonably comfortably.
Absolutely, and it's interesting from what looks like such a simple stat block that you can play them in quite markedly different ways.
Yeah, and even, we haven't spoken yet about the commandos and their special weapons. There's a few different... you can basically look at the rest of your list and figure out what holes need plugging, and plug them with your commando unit special weapons. So do I need a few more missile launchers because I don't have enough anti-air? I like to run one, just because. I
don't rate the Marauder missile launch, mostly because the units don't have targeting systems. They're not able to split their fire, which means you're just not getting the efficiency from the unit. If I'm shooting that one missile launcher over there at a vehicle, I'm also just kind of wasting the rest of the commando's shots. Or I'm shooting with an AP2 anti-air, anti-tank weapon at an infantry squad, in which case I'd probably just prefer to pin it with an HMG instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, sometimes it's good against your high armor infantry, particularly Forge Fathers that have heavy armor. The anti-tank is quite,
that's fair.
tasty there. Also, it's kind of more in a pinch. If you need that one extra, thing to throw at a tank, then it's there. You can also look at the Gora Endurer's order to give all the guns in the unit AP1 as well as the missile launcher, and then it's not.
And you're also giving it way to fire, then I guess as well, in order to more likely hit with that missile launcher.
And to shoot it against a mule or something like that, that becomes a unit that is probably going to kill a mule in one shot.
Yeah, but I mean it's a mule.
Yeah, but you're pinning and activating the unit inside, and that's really key.
Yeah.
I know you were turning your nose up a little bit about the fact of being able to shoot another unit, but the one of the things that we talked about in episode 1 was how units like missile launchers, which are AP2, are good against absolutely everything. You don't necessarily need to use it against that because it's reducing the AP.
It's true. It is just a more hitty gun. So
it's never bad. It's always good. What is not always good is the flamethrower. So I struggle to take these. I have before. For me, I just think, if you're taking it to activate a unit, it's a bit of a wing and a prayer. There's a lot of factions that will just laugh that off. And the factions that won't laugh it off probably have enough, units swarming around you that they just don't care. It's too situational for me and too short range that I just tend to not include them.
I do like them. I'm never expecting that I'm going to trigger the, hey, you failed your nerve check and activate the unit. If that ever happens, that's awesome. But I'm never expecting it to be the case. No, I mean, for mine, it's just, I'm expecting to be in close because it's command protocols. We're all up the board and I'm probably within 12 inches for some of my shooting. I'd rather have an extra shot and have both of them on fours, thanks. So.
Yeah, that's kind of nice until you consider the order that lets you shoot on fours anyway. And with a flamethrower, when you want to get really close, I'm imagining the day you're going to be within 6 inches and go, no, my flamethrower is shooting on fours instead of threes.
I'll let you know when that day
I'll await the call. All right, so we've spoken about the mules a fair bit, so why don't we dive into them? Sam?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the mule is just ubiquitous across the Firefight factions. I mean, what's not to love? It's very fast. It carries a small unit in there, so you just have to make sure that whatever is coming out of it has sufficient punch. You want to... They love chain activating, where you move up with the mule, spend the command point and activate the unit inside it in order to come out and either do some very short range shooting if it's a more shotgun style unit, or to come out and charge. Admittedly now with command protocols, copying the -1 because they didn't have line of sight when they commenced the charge. Mules are just excellent, and as you said, I know you run brawlers in yours because brawlers in small units still have enough punch. I mentioned before, I don't necessarily rate the missile launchers of the Marauders, the 2-shot AP2 anti-air, anti-tank. I'd rather have a laser cannon if I was going to be doing something in that. But I do like the HMGs that they've pinched from the Plague. Having the extra shot in there, no AP, but all you're looking to do is hit, because that tosses down a pin against everyone except someone in range of the commando captain. Because, I mean, by and large, you're wanting to pin that unit before you go in and charge it. It prevents the charge reactions. It means they have a -1 in combat. That's just beautiful synergy right there.
Yeah, and for 45 points, it's a bargain even if you don't put anything in there, because there's so many ways to use these. They're portable cover. The HMG, like you say, it pins, but don't forget it also strips shields pretty handily. So even if you're against Asterians, I've had mules that run around being an absolute pain in the butt because they're getting in the way, providing my units cover after they've deposited their brawlers, and they're just sitting there stripping shields off units, ready for my other units to shoot them.
Blocking up advance lines, they want to move their troops through there, but there's a corridor that has a mule wedged in it.
Blocking a transport between between a building and an impassable terrain. They're a lot of fun. I really enjoy mules because, well, they're 45 points. They
used to unlock, remember?
They used to unlock.
I'm
That
so
was,
glad
that was
I don't
the good old days. That was wild.
That was awful.
They give legs to brawlers, which is
Yep.
great. And then I pray that people don't kill them before they drop the brawlers, because after they drop the brawlers, people don't want to shoot them because they're like, that's just a 45-point unit running around. But you're an absolute menace with it. It's very fun to play with because it kind of makes your opponents pull their hair out. They have to commit something reasonable to take them out so they stop being a pain in the butt.
I mean, it is worth mentioning they don't have thumbs and butts.
Yep.
A quick aside, we might mention thumbs, butts and legs. I noticed Luke mentioned legs before. If you don't know what we're talking about, do check out Controlled Fire episode 2, Stay on Target, which is where we break down a lot of things for scenario play and we talk through thumbs, butts and legs. But we'll run on now. They are 45 points, but they don't have thumbs or butts. They're not contributing any unit strength. They're vehicles, so they can't do anything with objectives. It means you don't want to be taking too many of them, but I appreciate they're so cheap. You probably still can.
Well, but that's even more reason why people hate to target them, because
They're not even scoring now.
Yeah, people want to target them because the unit's inside. Once you drop the unit, they have almost no reason to target them, which means they don't until they realize how much of a pain they are getting in the way. Because I run them straight up in front of their units in their deployment zone. I don't care about it dying anymore. I'll put it wherever I can put it on the table to get in the way and be a pain in the butt. And people hate that. And then it's such a feel bad moment to have to shoot the darn thing. I love it.
Do you charge with your mules?
I never have. I did when playing Plague, but not with the Marauder ones.
Me either. I mean, and even my Plague ones seem to die as soon as they charge, which, Plague, that's fine. But
yeah, no, I did trap a unit by moving one unit up on one side and bringing the mule around the other side, charging a unit, and they were trapped and died.
that's actually a really good. I mean, the speed of mules and the sort of the width they can have along their side once they orient, you very well could get some interesting trappings going on from assaults.
Well, actually, the RC has clarified that it's almost impossible to trap a unit. It's a very special set of circumstances. If the unit's just there in the way, it will stop and be fine.
Yeah, for me, 45 points is just a bargain. Yeah. It's a bargain for what it does.
Yeah. It's the amount of disruption that mules bring to a list, just the ability to toss a unit straight up into somewhere where it's going to cause maximum disruption, or just get a unit on point. I need to be on that objective and I'm over the other side of the board, but now I can cross 24 inches with an 18, drop 6-inch advance, I am now on point. That's great.
Sure, it's only armor 6, but it's like it moves 12, 18, it's just...
Great unit.
Yeah.
But for only,
speaking of great units,
for only 10 points more, you can get a unit of more beasts. Sam loves them. Why don't you explain them, Sam?
I don't love them. I can see the place for more beasts. Luke doesn't like them. I think they have a place. I mean, for a start, they're a 55-point unlocking unit, which is good. They do have beast, which is not good because it means that they don't have thumbs. I see a couple of uses for these when they're actually on the board. They can be basically a distraction. They're a fast-moving threat that they have to at least have some kind of answer to. If you're able to pin a unit and then charge it with more beasts from 15 inches away, they're not slow. It's going to be causing trouble. Often the threat of the more beasts is probably more a thing than the actual more beasts themselves. But they're also potentially, if you're running a more static artillery type list, they could potentially be a good linebacker unit for anything which is able to get round to threaten your vulnerable backfield pieces. 15-inch move in order to go in and clear out threats for 55 points is not bad. What is bad, though, are the bombs. And paying 5 points to effectively downgrade the unit in order so that after I attack, I die. After each of those attacks, I get a coin toss in order to maybe get an extra hit. That's blasty too, right? And an extra bit of AP. But to do that, I have to sacrifice everyone who makes those attacks as a forced response. I don't get to choose to trigger it. No, I mean, if you want to do extra damage, just take more beasts. What is it? 5 points per bomb, and I think probably 8 points. 8 points per more beast. That means for the cost of 3 bombs, I could take 2 more beasts, which would give me more damage and an extra 2 wounds. I just do not see the point in the bombs. Even if they were 0, I don't know if I would take them.
Maybe 0. These are absolutely terrible. Look, I'm not going to lie. I've written them into lists in theory, and I've used them post command protocols. But that's just because I have the models. They're painted. I love the models. They're really cool.
They're very thematic,
and I wanted to play with them. Oh, and my paint scheme, like they just work. They look awesome. They're probably some of my best looking models in my army, but they're just kind of not great. So yeah, they're cheap, but you're pretty much always going to wish you had spent those points on something else. There is an argument to be made to having 1 or 2 with bombs, and I kind of dreamed up this argument before I realised that it's only 8 points per more beast and you're paying 5 for the bombs.
Yeah.
So I've already negated that argument, but this is the argument. It's that if I'm assaulting a unit and they're going to clap me back, I'm not going to kill 100% of the unit, they're going to hit me back, and I'm going to lose a model or 2. If I can sneak through an extra wound or 2, such that they have 1 or 2 less attacks coming back and potentially 1 or 2 less wounds coming to me, then it's kind of all come out in the wash anyway. But then you're like, but that's only just coming out in the wash. That's not any actual benefit for those points.
And you're paying for it to come out in the wash.
And it's more points. There's no reason to take the bombs. Don't take the bombs. If your models have bombs on them, pretend they don't. Just run another more beast or 2 instead of the bombs.
In that scenario there, you must be talking about something like single wound and multi-attack. You'd have to be something like that to be worth even considering.
I mean, I can see the thought behind the bombs, and that you can turn the more beasts into basically like a suicide unit that runs in and detonates itself in something important. But by the time you've paid for that unit in order to all be upgraded and be that sort of specialist detonator,
you may as well have the extra bodies.
Yes.
So, run them if you like them. They're fine as a unit, and I say fine meaning they're not completely unplayable. There's better options, but, you're not shooting yourself in the foot by taking them. Like you said, Sam, 15-inch charge is can be tasty when you need it. And if you're playing a really heavy support and or specialist list and you just need cheaper unlocks, then...
If you need a 3rd support, and sometimes you need to get to 6 troops, and sometimes that's hard to do if some of your other units are a bit larger, just being able to spend 55 points to get that 6th troop in, you've unlocked the 3rd support.
Yeah, like I'd kill for more beasts and enforcers. Right? Like I would murderize for them. But, the reality is they're on a list that doesn't suffer for unlocks too much, so it's a lot harder to find space. So speaking of specialists...
Oh, okay, so specialists. The first unit there is the skyscrapers. I used to see these reasonably before command protocols, but I haven't really seen them since. So, Sam, what are your thoughts on them?
I mean, I think they are good, but they are very pricey. They're fast with scouts, so they're really zipping up there in order to get into position before the game starts. But they're 15-inch with anti-grav, and so they're covering the ground. It's also worth noting that they do have 2 hit points each. There is a bit of a choice with them in terms of how you play. If you're going to be going shotguns and they're getting 2 dice each and a 3rd dice if they can get within 6 inches, that's certainly one way to play them. The only problem with that is they're only a 6-inch advance, which is like the same as your commanders, right? And so sure, you can get up close with your scout and that fast move, but then in order to maneuver to get those shotguns in, you're still just doing 6 inches. Admittedly, with antigrav, it's not terrible. The other option is going with the Ripper Claws, and then that they become a very effective 15-inch charging melee unit. But they're exactly the same as a Brawler unit that also have those Ripper Claws, but they're more than twice the price. So they're good, but they are pricey. I certainly don't think there's something that you can spam easily. They are the only unit that has anti-grav in the list, and so you could potentially have them coming out of a Hornet, but in which case you're probably doing something wrong. Because they already have Scout, right? Why would you put them in a Hornet in order to then make them slower? Moving on. Luke?
Yeah, so I think the reason you don't see them so much after command protocols is that they were ridiculously good before the changes. So what you could do is you could take a couple of units and you know 4 scout moves who's going first, right? So you know, are they going first and I need to hide my skyscrapers, or am I going first and I can push them way out in front because I get to double activate and charge them in, and I can use the same order more than once as well.
Yeah.
So you could really hammer 2 separate units before your opponent had a chance to do anything. They're things without charge reactions, or sometimes even the stuff with charge reactions, depending.
Yeah.
And it's easy in Marauders to outdrop opponents as well. So you could be looking at a situation where you're a 14 drop army, and straight away on turn 1, before your opponent has had a chance to act, that now for turn 1 they're down to 8, 9, or 10 activations only because you've just punched 2 units and caused them to activate. And also, Marauders, it's pretty easy to get lots of command dice as well. So you can often find yourself in a situation where you are doing the first deployment, you're going first, you've got the scout movements, you're going first, and everything lines up. And that was really easy to do before. Now that's all very tempered. There's a lot of less power to that strategy.
Because you can't chain activate on the first activation, and you can't do the same order more than once, so you can't buff both units for the charge.
Yep. And also, with the whole -1 to charging when you can't see, now you're like, if I can't charge with all of my skyscrapers straight away, then I need to hide them so that they don't get shot off the board when my opponent double activates and shoots them off the board. So now you're hiding them, but now you get that -1 when you do charge, even if they are within range, because...
Would you still do the scout up with 1 unit knowing that you're getting first activation in order to get a 1 15-inch charge, or are the skyscrapers too expensive to do that?
I'm not sure it's worth the meme with 1 unit. When it was 2, it was very valuable, because what's coming up behind those 2 is a fleet of mules filled with brawlers, right? So you were just setting the stage for the pain to come, because those brawlers would also be getting in turn 1. Mm-hmm. Now the playstyle is completely different, and you're playing a lot more shooting, I think, heavy in a lot of builds in Marauders. So that tactic doesn't really have much. I think there's still a case for them, particularly the shotgun versions as aerial deployment units to drop in the backfield. I haven't run that yet because all of my skyscrapers have river claws. But
I'm shocked.
But I'll get around to doing some shotgun ones, and I'll run them in the backfields and see how they go.
Going to use the new prints of the goblins skyscrapers that have just come through in the vault.
Yeah, I think I might. They are awesome.
Okay, now we're on to one of the new units under command protocols coming in the list, which is the Wolverine APC. Armour Personnel Carrier. Very similar to the Armour Personnel Carrier that the Forge Fathers have. Admittedly, this is sitting in a specialist slot, but it does shoot a hell of a lot more and it has very similar stats. But have you guys used the APC yet?
I haven't. I'm, as you've heard, I'm a massive fan of the mules. So it's been a bit of a hard sell.
See, I rate the Wolverine. I've had a chance to run it, but obviously I like running the larger squads, and this carries 10.
Yeah, exactly. I have been looking at it more and more lately, and I'm very intrigued. I think I'll give them a crack. They're significantly more survivable, particularly because they can get the smoke, and they put out twice the dice in shooting. So those are some good facets.
8 dice pinning.
Yeah, that's tasty. Or 8 dice against shields.
Fives.
And they can carry, a 9 or 10 person unit. Why 9, you ask? Well, bodyguard. So there's the glaringly obvious downside, which, besides being, twice as expensive as a mule and in a specialist slot, is the 612 speed. I would have liked to have seen them be 912, but just to annoy Forge Fathers.
I think they sit right there, because it's also... We keep on mentioning the changes with command protocols, but I don't know if you necessarily you wouldn't use the Wolverine like you would the Mule, where you're rocketing a unit up in order to disrupt. The Wolverine is going to be there in order to get a unit onto point 12. I go up 12 and then advance out 6 and shoot. I'm seeing this as a way to claim the center of the board rather than a way to get into the opponent's backfield.
Yeah, for sure. And the popping smoke on one to ensure that is a really good tactic.
Also worth noting that this is unit strength 1 as well, so I mean it doesn't have thumbs, but it does have a butt.
Yeah.
The mule does not. How do you feel seeing the Wolverine APC? I know your Drakars are something which you've lamented sometimes how slow they are. We see the Wolverine as slow. How do you feel about
I personally, I don't think I would take it. I think there are better options in the specialist slots, and the mules at 45 points do what I would want it to do. I mean, I've got enough Drakars, and I know that armor 7 doesn't protect as well as people might think it does, and mine actually have heavy armor, and this doesn't. So So that's the other part of it that I would probably look at there. When you've got an army list that has mules, I would probably be looking at those instead, personally.
Yeah, but for mine, it is there in order to get your larger squads up and, like I said, to claim the middle of the battlefield. It suits some playstyles. Do you know what suits all playstyles?
This is the stuff. Yeah. When Sam wrote this list, he knew what he was doing when he allocated me the specialist slot. Everybody here in Brisbane knows my feelings on missile launchers in general. We're on to the Marauder weapons teams. To me, it's the number one pick in this slot. If not, it's the number one pick in the whole army list. I think they're ridiculously costed for what they do. And I know that some people might slightly disagree with me, but I just think at 80 points for 6 wounds, reaching 36 inches across the table, 4 dice, AP2, I can rattle them all off.
Blast D2.
Forget the Blast D2 on the end. I don't understand when the rule books encourages people to blocking terrain in at 24 inches while we got weapons that are even more than 24 inches. I know playing on someone else's table who are playing next to me or what. And, and there's weapons in this list that have 48 inches, I know that, but at 36 inches I still think is way too much for 80 points. And I'm not going to go on, otherwise I'll be carrying on for half an hour at least.
Control fire, not blaze away, mate.
Yeah, I think the GCPS one is bad enough, and this is even cheaper, and in my opinion better, and it doesn't even have slow reload, and there's enough to make me throw my phone over my so boys, all yours.
Well, I mean, I will say I am surprised by the lack of slow reload on this unit. I do agree. It is like an artillery unit, right? These are you wheel in these pieces and then you fire from that position. Whereas because it doesn't have slow reload, it is as nimble and agile as a run and gun rifleman unit, right? So
Yes, they've got wheels, bro.
No
slow reload. They've got wheels. It's like a wheelbarrow. Wheelbarrows aren't slow.
No. No, I mean, for mine, it does feel like, if not actually an oversight, I guess it's a decision because it's in the specialist slot and the GCPS ones aren't. They have slow reload, but you can buy them an upgrade so they don't. How about the Marauder ones don't have slow reload? For mine, it isn't necessarily the moving with them, it's the fact that you can then steady aim with them and still ignore a modifier, which you can't if you have slow reload.
At 36 inches.
At 36 inches, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with the range because it's a long range artillery weapon. It should be that long.
Yeah, using this unit the key is positioning. It's funny, you say they're probably the best in slot specialist, and everyone says, myself included, but they're specialists. They're not troops like in GCPS. But on the flip side, they're the only specialist I run. I don't need those specialist slots for anything else because I just run these guys.
And they're cheaper.
Yeah, I run because I love Rainmakers, but I run them with my command unit. So
yeah, okay.
Now that I'm not really running skyscrapers anymore, these are the only specialists, so they have all the unlock in the world. I run at least 2. They're great. I've run 3. That's a bit obnoxious. So I've just to be friendly, I've gone down to 2.
Friendly.
And to be clear, I think we're all talking from the perspective of the missile launcher weapons teams. I think the Hugh Beamer ones, they're fine, but there's other things that I would take for those instead. I only run the missile launchers. I think they're a fix-all. You know, they're fantastic on troops, and then when they need to shoot a vehicle, they can shoot a vehicle just fine.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to pin it because they don't have anti-tank, but, you know, they're going to
kill it.
They're going to ruin it.
They don't have to pin it if it's dead.
I mean, the Hugh cannon, I guess, has the problem that it's only a 24-inch range, which I guess is less of a problem because this unit doesn't have slow reload.
Yeah.
But yeah, 24-inch range on an anti-tank weapon, because sometimes you really do need to reach out to some of those vehicles. I'm thinking like your Wolverine tanks and so on with their very extensive range, or your Chromas and so on.
Yeah, the Hubium version is what the gun track should have been. Just transplant it straight in. Done.
Yeah, I certainly think that each of the units could afford to learn a bit from the other. Like the gun track is slow reload, and this artillery piece isn't slow reload. The mechanized gun platform, slow reload. The wheelbarrows, not slow reload. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as we say, these are just excellent. If you want something which is going to reach out across the table and really hurt anything it looks at, it's the Marauder weapon teams.
Yeah, they're one of the reasons why I say there's no gaps in the list, because they fix a few gaps.
Shall we chat about grunt bots?
I have to admit, it's one of the more flavoursome models in the line,
lovely.
for sure. Love the look of them. Only gone against them once, so in the list with Jason, I think that's on there, but I don't think I've seen you. Oh, I don't play.
I don't run them, but it's mostly just because I don't have the model. I love the flavour of them. I mean, 4D AP2. I mean, they're in competition with Ripper Maulers 3D AP3, but I mean, an extra attack for dropping a pip of AP.
There is a large overlap with the Ripper Maulers, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I think they're best placed in the list, obviously, where you run the command vehicles to get the Walker buff. Mm-hmm. The models are super duper cool, so that should be a reason in and of itself to run this unit, because everyone loves them. They're very thematic. So if you've got them, run them, because there's certainly nothing wrong with them. I think for me, the Maulers edge them out just a little bit because of all the extra benefits that you get with the Maulers that we'll talk about momentarily. I think these guys hit just a little bit harder. They're a good unit. I just don't have a spot for them.
I mean, it's interesting because they're Armor 7, Heavy Armor, Walker, Frenzy 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas the Ripper Maulers are only Armor 6, but with 3 hit points instead of 2, and Resilient 1 instead of Heavy Armor.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, they're kind of situationally more survivable than the other.
It's a good choice between the two. I think it's one of those things where you find taking either one. One is, I would say, slightly more survivable, but again, it would depend upon what's targeting them. But to me, I think they're pretty.
You'd say the grunt bots are more survivable by and large. I mean, Armor 7 with Heavy Armor, I think trumps. Oh, sorry, Armor 7, Heavy Armor, 2 wounds versus Armor 6, Resilient 1, 3 wounds.
That's, as I said, it will depend upon what's actually targeting them. You depend upon the list, I guess, on what else is in there and what would draw those devastating weapons away from.
Devastating is the interesting one. There's no devastating 3. There's some devastating D2 plus 1.
Yeah.
There's some devastating 2 and some devastating D2. So the Maulers kind of come out slightly ahead because with the 3 wounds, there's not that many weapons that are doing 3. So if someone's sneaking through 1 wound with a devastating weapon, well, you're not taking out a Mauler, but you are taking out a Gruntbot.
Although, I mean, if this is just regular rifles firing at you, they're all blinking off that heavy armor. Whereas the Resilient 1... we've just been chatting about the Ripper Maulers. Shall we dive into the Maulers and the Rainmakers a little more? So, I mean, as we were saying, they're very similar to the Grunt bots, except they come with a black command dice, which is lovely. They have advanced training, so they can operate a bit more away from your commanders. And they roll 1 die less for offense, but have +1 AP. Still with anti-tank, though. So, how do we feel about them? I normally do run them.
Yeah, good. I don't, but that's because I run other things. They're good. I've actually got 7 of them on my painting desk, partly done, so I will run them at some point, but I haven't been rushing through them because I don't tend to write them into lists. But they're good. The stats are good. They're great in fun in Dead Zone. Rampage can, it can be a bit of a downside. But, they're good. They're certainly not a bad choice or a wrong choice ever.
I should also mention they also come with Inspiring.
Yep.
I mean, this is a unit I really don't mind just buying at base unit cost, 90 points. I don't need to add any more on because I'm not getting any extra utility from the Inspiring or the Black Command die for the extra models. I really just don't mind tossing down that 90 points and knowing that I've got a little bit of hurt I can dish out in the middle of my list somewhere.
Yeah, they can go pin a flank and sort of hold it off by themselves away from everyone else, no problem.
Yep. They are bulky though, which is worth mentioning.
Yes. No buildings, no transports.
Yeah, so no mules for these guys, even though they'd really benefit from it. But I do enjoy running them. I guess, and you mentioned that for your Rainmakers, you tend to run them in your Ripper Warlords.
Yeah, I mean, I think the unit of Ripper Rainmakers, a 4-strong unit is pretty cool. Very expensive, a lot of dice, a lot of damage. It's just for me, I guess, because I am more than happy to run 2 Warlords with 2 Rainmakers on it. That just finding the space for another unit as well. That's going to be very costly. It's a bit of a big ask. And so you might say, oh well, don't run 4, run 3 or 2. But by that point, they may as well be a commander.
Yeah. I mean, I do run a unit of 4 of these.
Yeah. Dope.
And they're great. Probably the biggest thing when playing them is thinking with their targeting systems, how you're going to be splitting their fire. And I tend to find I'm either going all the anti-infantry stuff, so that is the rotary cannons and the rocket salvos at one unit, and then the Hugh Beamer going over at a vehicle, because it's got a lovely 36-inch range, AP3 anti-tank, beautiful. Or I may not have that sort of nice targeting split, in which case I'll fire everything, the rotary cannon and the Hugh Beamers at the unit I can see, and then the rocket salvo at another unit that I can't. They very much are the Swiss Army knife of a unit, just because they carry guns for dealing with everything. Yeah,
I call them the fix-alls. They're superb at that. They do have a sweet spot of 12 to 18 inches where they can use all the guns, because the indirect rocket salvos can be used over 12, and then everything has the 18 inches or more range. I like yeeting the rockets off, like in a YOLO attempt to hit something that's like hiding behind a building. In that vein, running a unit of 4 could be quite tasty, because 4 dice hitting on 7s is a whole lot better than 2 dice hitting on 7s.
Absolutely.
And much more likely to pin something. Pin you behind the building, so that you're stuck behind a building going, oh, damn, what do I do now? I can't just unpin and shoot because I can't see anything. So tough choices.
And also great for just going, oh, that's stealthy in cover small unit commander who's stood over there. Yep. Well, it's 7s regardless. Yep. Have some rockets.
Yeah, that's awesome. So they're great at just sort of doing whatever they need to do, wherever they need to do it, whenever they need to do it. They're a great fix-all.
Yes, I mean, I think because I enjoy their damage output so much is the reason I don't run them as a Ripper Warlord unit. I do like them as straight Rainmakers, but I can certainly see the argument for the Warlord instead.
I guess I'm just curious on why you take a whole unit of 4 and not 2 units of 2. So what else are you taking in your support slots then?
In my specialist slots?
Specialist slots, yes. Sorry.
Maulers I've normally got in there as well.
Weapons teams?
I don't run weapons teams.
Oh. Yeah, that's
it's
you mentioned that before.
I mostly fill it up with command.
And again, for me, I'd say I think most of the Marauder range models are really excellent, but the suits as well as the front bots are also some of my favourite models in the range. Yeah. So that would be one of the main reasons I would even put them on the table on that. But yes, all right. Well, that takes us to the end of specialists, and then we're moving on to support.
I think support is the most split of the Marauder section, because there's some excellent options in Marauder support, and there's some absolute trash in there as well.
Trash is right. It's a funny way to pronounce gun track, but we'll run with it. Oh, look, my notes say these are trash. Okay. So support slots are very valuable. They're very valuable in Marauders. They're very valuable in a lot of lists. Gun tracks are a support slot. right? That's one of their biggest problems. Well, there's a few problems, but that's one of the biggest ones. Because you look at a 60-point unit that might sling out a wound or two throughout the turns. You know, they can be there, it can be in the way, it can exist. You know, that's not too bad. Pre-command protocols, I had a list that had 6 gun tracks in it because they are dirt cheap and it's a threat you can't ignore for the entire game. So at some point you have to shoot it and it's 60 points, right? The problem is you can't do that so easily now with the way that the unlocks work. You know, running 6 of them is completely out of the question. Running 3, I've run 2. So don't run the mortars. They're atrocious. The Hugh Beamer one, I think, is the most likely that you would want to play. And I've run 2 of them before, but they're just so underwhelming. And at 60 points for the entire support slot option, it's really super hard to justify. Particularly because if you take 2, they're both going to be shooting at the same target anyway because neither of them is doing much when they shoot. If these were available in a unit of 2, I'd be much more enamored with them. Particularly like, you know, a unit of 1 for 60 or upgrade to a unit of 2 for 110, get that spicy 10-point saving. I would go back to considering these.
If there weren't the saving and it was just you can pay 60 points for 1 or 120 points for 2, I still think it's better.
It's still better. It's still much more likely to see play. I probably wouldn't do it at that point because there's other options that I would take in the support slot. Slow reload is just a hindrance.
It's a unit that you want to stay at the back that has slow reload so it can't steady aim for effect. It has to steady aim just in order to
And it shoots on 5s, so anything in the way at all, ever, it's shooting on 6s, so it's missing.
Yep. Yeah, no, I really don't rate these, which is a shame because I have buckets of them.
I've got 6.
Yeah, I've got something similar. Yeah, and it's also there. I mean, I appreciate they're only 60 points, but it's still a relatively small damage output regardless. I mean, 2D AP5 with anti-tank and devastating D2.
The 2 dice is just, it's a big downside.
Yeah.
They don't die that easily.
Because their armor... Well, I mean, I think it's probably also because the enemy's not targeting them because they're rubbish. I mean, they also don't have thumbs and butts. They're a vehicle that's unit strength 0. And you look at the mortar, and it's, which I will say, lovely that it's a 48-inch range. That's pretty rare in the game. Great. It has 3 dice, and if you're hitting on 7s, the odds of you hitting and pinning are okay. But if I'm paying 75 points, I want more than an okay chance of pinning. I can pay 45 points and get a mule and get a very good chance of pinning. Thank you very much.
That's right. Yes, it's a premium. It's a bad gun that's a premium over another bad gun. It's you can't justify. But I have run them. I will run them again. I don't think they're good. They're probably the worst unit in the list. But
Warbeast.
No.
Okay, so there is. We'll get there. Yeah, there is a worse unit.
I've got a question for you because obviously it's my favourite unit in the whole game. If the missile launch, so if the weapons teams had slow reload
and the gun tracks
didn't.
No, still wouldn't.
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
the support slot for me. It's too tough.
Sure, but I mean, I would be considering it more then so that I could steady aim with my heavy Hugh cannon, actually possibly do something. Or I can actually grind 6 inches on my tracks into a new position in order to line up a shot and then take that anti-tank shot. I still don't know if I'd take it because it's Marauders and there are very good support options in Marauders.
Yeah,
but
we'll get to the next one. I'm going to throw a similar question to you again in a second.
So if you ask me that question and you could take them into units of 2, then I'd be much more enamored with that as an option.
Yeah, so that was my next one.
I'd be crying because now my weapons teams have slow reload, but it would certainly make the gun tracks more playable.
So that was where I was going to go to next because the next unit we talk about is Hulks and you can get multiple of them. So if instead you could only take a single Hulk and you couldn't take multiple of them and you could take multiples at the gun tracks and they didn't have slow reload.
Oh, but no one would play Hulks.
Yeah.
That's the reason why no one's playing gun tracks.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same reason.
It is absolutely one of the reasons you don't play gun tracks. I might still take a Hulk as a one-off just because they are excellent. Should we break them down?
Yeah,
for a start, they're shoot 4 with an AP5 gun that's anti-tank devastating 2. That's great. Admittedly 18-inch range, but they're armor 6 with resilient 1 and 4 hit points each.
Yep.
So they don't mind getting up into the thick of things with that enormous gun that they're shooting. I will say, I do find it a little bit odd that they are effectively a troll type unit, but they're actually the sharpshooters of the Marauder force with shoot 4. I think they could probably stand to be shoot 5 and they'd still be excellent, or they'd still be good. At shoot 4, they're excellent.
Yeah, I used to run 3 units of 2 pre-command protocols. Now, they got nerfed by going up in points, down in range, and support unlocks changed a little bit.
And also with devastating would have reduced the amount of shots they're putting out as well.
Yeah, exactly. So they got worse overall, which is fine because they're still good.
They got substantially worse, and they're still one of the best options in the support slot.
So and so the reason I have 6 gun tracks, like I mentioned, is because I have 6 Hulks, and you buy them in a booster where you get both of them. So I also have 6 of the brawler with the 2.
They're in the vault this
knives.
month, by the way.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Tell me again. No, but that's cool. They're in the vault. I like the vault. Yeah, so I used to run 3 units because that was a heck of a lot of fun before. Now I tend to just run 1 unit of 2.
Yep.
But they're solid. They're very good. They can sit on things. They can take a bodyguard. They can do all of the things because they have the thumbs and the butts. They shoot well. They survive well. They're height 4, so they can see things that other people can't see sometimes.
Makes them sound vaguely mystical, but yes.
No, they're only 18-inch range. Great unit. Everyone should consider running one.
Or 2.
And having multiples in the unit. I agree. I think the Hulks is pretty much the star of the pick in its particular slots. But again, I don't understand why they're shooting on 4s. But anyway, but I think that's the biggest issue for the gun tracks to me is the fact that you can choose multiple Hulks, and the weapons teams don't have slow reload, and they do.
They're outclassed at range, and they're outclassed for just raw shooting power.
And I think if those were all added to the gun tracks, and obviously with the points changed with that as well. But I said I think Hulks are still viable as a single unit because it has the assault option that the others don't. In there, so it's still viable in assault.
I mean, they are. I mean, I think they probably prefer to have that assault as a "you've charged me, I'm going to make you regret it a little," rather than as something I'd be aiming for.
Unfortunate, but anyway, I think we got the good old Hornet.
Well, I mentioned before this is I think that the worst unit in the Marauder list. Because I think that the TAD 65 Hornet dropship has the distinction of being the worst unit in every list it's in. And it's in 4 out of the factions?
4, I think.
Maison, GCPS, Plague, Marauders.
Yep.
Yeah. So almost half the lists. I know we mentioned in episode 1 our feelings on flying transports, and that's the reason that the Hornet just doesn't have a role. Particularly now the Wolverine's in the list, because it might... No, it didn't. But you could argue it had a role before as it's a transport for if you have more than 6, but now you've got the Wolverine. The problem with the Hornet is flying transports are just so slow. If you think that the Mule allows you to move 18 and then advance 6 and shoot, so it gives you a 24-inch drop and shoot. The Wolverine has a 12-inch move and then a 6-inch drop and shoot, or a 6-inch and then the charge, not quite so good. The Hornet allows you to move 12 and then drop in base-to-base contact and not shoot. The amount of extra gain you get is 1 base width. You are paying 80 points to move an extra base width up the board.
Yeah, it's worth noting there's one unit in the list that doesn't suffer from being in a Hornet.
Yeah, we did say that,
and it's probably the unit that cares the least about it.
Yeah, because they have scout and aerial deployment. They have 2 other ways to get there faster.
And you look at the Interceptor and Enforcers, and it's not so bad because you can move forward, you can drop a unit, and they can shoot.
Yep.
Because they have anti-grav. So it's not so bad there. But in every faction, I don't think there's fly on any unit in any faction that has the Hornet.
Anti-grav?
There's anti-grav. but there's no fly.
Motorbirds used to have fly, now it's
They're
anti-grav.
but they're bulky.
But they're bulky, so there's actually no anti-grav units in the plague list.
Yep.
There's Rangers in the GCPS,
Rangers,
but they have Scout.
Yes.
There's Rangers in Maison. They also have Scout. So there's no one who can go in the Hornet who can't get there faster on their own.
Yep.
So, I mean, why would you take the Hornet? You can give it the crew-operated HMGs, where you're paying an extra 20 points for the unit in order to make it almost as good as the TAD 67, the Stinger in the Marauder list. You can choose to give it a missile launcher.
Which you may as well, at that point, be taking a commando unit with a missile launcher.
I mean, it's just so fundamentally outclassed by the TAD 67 Stinger, which can do everything it can, but better, sacrificing transport, but transport that you can't use.
Yep, 100%.
Shall we quickly chat on the TAD 67? Does anyone have anything good to say about the Hornet?
No, that we covered that in episode 1, but anyway, the 67 is also relatively new, I just wanted to point out.
It's true. I mean, it has been out for under a year, the TAD 67, but yeah, if you have a Hornet, it's well worth printing the upgrades to make it not a Hornet anymore.
Well, see, I have the OG Hornet. It hasn't been painted yet because it's no good. But I'm going to use a couple of HMG commandos, magnetize under their bases, but do their bases not my jungle theme, but in like a metal plating. So I can open the doors of the Hornet and magnetize them to stand on the doors, blazing their guns out the sides.
My Plague Hornet, which is painted up and everything, does have the HMG crew, and it just gets run as a TAD 67.
Yeah.
Any of my opponents are under no illusions that it's a TAD 65.
Yeah.
But the TAD 67, the Stinger, is excellent.
Yeah, it's great. The damage per point is excellent, and it's got the maneuverability to get where it needs to be. I do think Headstrong's a must. For a flying unit that's pretty easy to pin, you really want that Headstrong.
So that's buying it correctional stabilizers, which gives the unit Headstrong?
10 points.
Reasonable
price.
A great investment. And I mean, it's Nerve 4 as well, which is something else it has over its unfortunate cousin. But I mean, the ability to fly 12 and then unleash 12 shots AP1 marksman, that's great. I mean, I can see the argument for why you'd also upgrade the nose gun.
Yeah, it's nice. I wouldn't, but it's nice as an option if you are doing something with your list that means that there's some holes that need plugging. It can plug them.
I just mean, well, with targeting systems, you can go laser cannon over there, and then these 8 shots over here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I like just absolutely drilling the unit that's in front of me, but I can certainly see the argument.
All right, so I've professed my love of stunt bots enough that we finally get to talk about them.
Yeah.
I love
also
them.
a sweet model.
Yeah, great. I love the model. My very first reaction, I think I went, what the? And then I was like, ooh, I really like this. I think hood down is the way to play him. I'm not a big fan of the goblin inside. I did get sent one of my stunt bots without the actual canopy cover. So he doesn't have a canopy cover because I didn't get one. But that's okay. Helps to make them look different. I play the Tank Buster one. So the one with the two, like I said, I call them the good gun and the bad gun. But they're both anti-tank AP.
For clarity, would you like to say the names of the ones you think are good and the ones you think are bad?
Well, see, these ones don't have special names for the loadouts. They just list the loadouts. So the thermal cannon and Hue cannon are the two weapons options that I take on it. And so the good gun's the Hue cannon, and the bad gun is the thermal cannon, which isn't bad. It's just bad compared to a Hue cannon that shoots the same number of dice, same devastating, same anti-tank. It's just lower AP.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And you run yours as twin guns?
Yeah, just pew pew all the way. So this is the guy that I love using explosive rounds on because he gets 4 shots on 5s, with steady aim because 24 inches. Throw out 4 shots that have blast and devastating.
Can I also call out the melee variant, which is going to end up with 9 close combat dice? That's bonkers.
He's tasty, and I think if you're running the
Raider?
if you're running the command vehicle, you want to be running at least one of the melee variant in that list. For me, it doesn't fit in my sort of combined arms Marauder list because I need the support slot for something else. But I think in that build,
You don't fancy having something charging straight up? Armor 7, heavy armor, with 5 wounds behind it and 9 attacks when it reaches the line.
Yeah, it's
With
fun.
frenzy too.
It's fun, but I think I love shooting.
Yeah. I mean, I will say for myself, I think I probably prefer to run the 1 gun, 1 melee arms rather than all eggs in one basket, because that means you can then be 6 inch up or 9 if you've got the Raider, because it's 3 to advance or to sprint. The ability to advance 9 and pop off a shot and then when you're ready to charge and still be pretty good it's not bad. It means you're doing something on the way.
Yeah, I'm just a min-maxer, so
Shall we have a look at the Bronco?
go for it.
So I mean, the Bronco is the same in some ways as it is across some of the other lists. We know there's some distinctions. The GCPS Bronco can get stealthy. The Maison Bronco can get the beam weapon. The Marauder Bronco, instead of taking the regular penetrator shells and fragmentation shells, should note Marauder Bronco doesn't get guided penetration shells. They just get the regular kind. But instead, they can choose to take the Shredder Cannon. And I think it's not a terrible option. In terms of damage output, 10 dice that pin is pretty good. With targeting systems, it means that for a single activation, you're pinning 2 units.
Yeah, but hear me out. That's 130 points. For 135 points, you can buy 3 mules with HMGs. You don't even need to put anything in them.
I will say that those 3 mules, between them, would be unit strength 0, and this is unit strength 1.
Yeah, that's fair, but I don't think Marauders are suffering for unit strength. They're not suffering for bodies to put on an objective. I think, totally fine unit. I think it gets squeezed out by the other support options. In other lists, it would probably be more worthwhile. It's totally fine, totally viable. I would just rather run 3 mules.
I hear you.
And we're down to the last unit in the list. So the Wolverine tank. It's the same as the other Wolverine tanks. I think it's fine, but if I wanted to play tanks, I'd play GCPS. What it does can be done just fine by other things that fit the list better and have better synergies, rather than just plonking a tank down on a wing and shooting.
Yeah, I mean, it has a 48-inch range.
Yeah.
Doing 3 shots AP4, anti-tank, devastating. Or it can pop out that frag. I mean, just the ability to reach out 48-inch and do some damage, not with slow reload. And if they are ever able to get you in range, your armor 8 with heavy armor.
Yeah,
it's good.
It's a good unit. It's just, there's other things I'm spending my points on. It's fine, but...
Yeah.
GCPS love tanks. I would play 3. Marauders. I'm looking to play other things.
Yeah, no, I can understand. I mean, I think I'd probably be looking at it more because I don't run the weapons teams, and this would be my plonk in order to get the range.
That's fair.
Or possibly the Rainmakers. Any thoughts on the Wolverine tank, Mike? I know you faced them a few times.
Only in the GCPS actually, but again, it's the 48-inch, but that's the thing we're going on before, and I think most of those units where you have multiple ammunition options, you seem to be paying a bit of a premium for that choice that you can't really use. So as I said, I had the same, most armies have a similar unit, and I do think they're probably a few extra points more than what they probably need to be, but in a GCPS list I've written and thinking of putting together, I have several of them. I didn't put one in the Marauder list because I think they have plenty of other options to be able to cover for it, which we'll probably see when we do reveal lists.
All right, which I think might be now.
It's time for. So these lists that we're about to go through will be linked to in the show notes, and they will be public on the companion, so you can check them out and read along at home. Sam, do you want to take us through your list?
Sure thing. So my list is called Full Metal Racket. It's a list that I've built in order to take advantage of the Raider command vehicle. I was saying I felt it was a little unloved, so this is very much intended to showcase all the Raider could bring to the table. So in the command slots, it has a Raider command vehicle, a Marauder warlord with 4 brawlers as his bodyguard, and a commando captain with 2 snipers. I was saying I love all those things. There's a Marauder mule in order to carry my Marauder warlord and his friends around the battlefield. 1 unit of more beasts just to run as linebackers. I got 2 squads of 8 commandos, each with an AMG. As I mentioned, I much prefer the pinning utility over the other stuff. 2 units of 8 brawlers. One of them has a flamer, and the other one has a little bit of extra stuff in terms of claws. My thoughts with the flamer is often I'm going to get my brawlers onto a point, and I may not necessarily want to charge off it. Having the flamer gives me just a little bit of extra shoot if I want to. The main thing that I'm using to take advantage of the Raider is 2 units of 4 grunt bots, 2 stunt bots, one with the thermal cannon and buzzsaw, one with the big claw and hue cannon, and 1 unit of Ripper Rainmakers just to give myself a little bit of
Fire support.
A little bit of fire support. The one thing the list does lack for is just a little bit of range, and so the Rainmakers are kind of having to fill the gaps there. The stunt bots, I'm hoping, with the extra maneuverability the Raider brings and their guns can do some extra stuff as well. But the thought is that the Raider's going to be popping its aura. All those stunt bots and grunt bots, the grunt bots can charge up 15 inches towards the enemy. The stunt bots are maneuvering 9 and shooting and then eventually closing. The commandos are getting on point, and the brawlers are coming up behind those grunt bots because that way they're not actually taking the casualties. I'm copping it all on the chin of the grunts. That's Full Metal Racket, my list for the Marauders.
All right, my list is called Pin-Up Boys, and that's for 2 reasons. The first is that it's very good at avoiding pins and very good at dishing them out. So for the command options, I've got and this list, by the way, is a list I play. It's I've played it at varying point levels. It is my list. It is my build that I play on a regular basis and do quite well with. So. I've got a commando captain with 2 snipers. That may change. I'm not enamored with them. We'll see how it goes in the long run. I've got 2 Ripper warlords, both with 2 Rainmaker retinues. 2 mule transports, both with HMGs. 2 units of 10 Marauder commandos with HMGs as well. So there's loads of pinning weapons to dish those out. Then a unit of 8 commandos with a missile launcher, just more sort of as a bit of a fixer if I need an extra shot here or there to just place an extra couple of wounds on the vehicle. It has had the killing blow of a vehicle sitting on 1 wound before, so it is kind of tasty. Then I've got 2 units of brawlers. The first one is 5 brawlers. Why 5, you ask? Because there can be 6 in a mule. That's to take a bodyguard and push across the field and score those tasty points. There are 4 of those with Ripper claws and 1 just with the regular claws. Then a unit of 6 brawlers, and there's 2 of them with the claws and the rest have Ripper claws. Then for the only specialist options, there's 2 weapons teams with full loadout of missile launchers. This is 8 dice on 5s with a steady aim, AB2 and Blast E2, and they put out wounds. They're fantastic. The real key with these guys, by the way, is the firing lines. Just making sure you position early with good firing lines that you're not going to get in the way of, and that you're going to sort of be able to pick out what you want to pick out.
Because they're only height 2, right?
Yeah, and so they can't see over much. They can't see over any of their units, so they do need those firing lines. Then for support, we've got a unit of 2 Hulks and a stunt bot with the thermal cannon and hue cannon. So if you imagine the map, if you flick your pages to the control scenario, you're going to see a map, right? And the map's going to have your deployment zones, and there's going to be these 2 diagonal lines that divide your deployment zone into thirds. So the way I tend to play this army is I'll put my commando captain smack bang in the middle of my deployment zone, because that's where he belongs, and then I'll kind of do a two sort of force deployment on that dotted line, maybe with a couple of things in the middle as well if I need to, particularly to help protect that commando captain. And I'll stay within those lines generally because that's the lines where the aura reaches. So I'll have one of the warlords out on each flank. So I pop the anti-pin bubble, things don't get hit by pinning weapons, I slowly move my force forward as I need to. The mules kind of stay protected until they need to reach out and deliver some brawlers to touch somebody. And then the Ripper Warlords kind of play, second fiddle to a lot of the lists. They kind of throw some dice out and do some damage, but they don't want to be the priority target because we want to get that unpinning and we want them to be able to walk in and clean things up later. So the commandos, the brawlers all go out as the priority targets because they're the ones in your face while it's backed up by lots of guys doing lots of damage.
Lovely.
Yeah. So Mike, what about your list?
So the original list I created was very similar to yours. I guess 'cause I played it too often, or played it so similar and great. So I'm going to copy another person who plays Marauders in the Brisbane area, which is Courtney. He's had a list that's which I've nicknamed the Black Tie or a Black Tie event because it's full of suits. So we'll go with that. So it starts off with the Commando Captain with a couple of snipers in there, the Ripper Warlord with two Ripper Rainmaker suits, and a Marauder Warlord with a retinue of brawlers to go with them, as we discussed before. Armor 6 going in.
It's great.
There are 3 mules, all with the autocannon, 45 points. The HMG, 45 points. There is a unit of more beasts, so I can get the slots in there. In there, so then we've got 2 units of commandos with the HMG as well, fully kit out to the 10. 2 units of Marauder brawlers, just at 6, just so they can jump in the other mules, which leaves them. Leaves the Warlord in one mule and the brawlers units in the other. Then we got 2 Ripper suits of 4, 2 units of Ripper suits, 4 in each unit, to potentially go up the flanks and do what they do best and tear holes in things. And last but not least, we also had another unit of Ripper Rainmakers, which is just at a unit of 3, which takes it out to around about 1,500 points. It's only around about 93 shoot dice, but it's got 134 assault dice and should have a little bit of fun with it.
That sounds great. It's interesting to see some of the stuff taken across all our lists. That Commando Captain crops up with some regularity.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's good to the point of busted. I think he just brings so much to the table. I think you guys chose to include more beasts just to meme on me a little bit. But it's good to show that there is some variety in play style to a degree. Obviously, both of you chose lists that are quite heavily combat focused, whereas my list is much more of a balanced list in terms of it's fairly good at shooting, but also has a few combat options for where it needs to put things.
Yeah, that Mike, it's balanced. Balance that list.
And for the people who are waiting for the 100 wound list, Luke's is pretty close to, if not the 100 wound list. The list I created was very similar to Luke's, which is why I changed it. Mine was well and truly 100 wounds overall in the whole list, and with around about 120 shoot dice and 115 or so assault dice to go with it. So,
nicely rounded it sounds.
Yeah. Well-rounded list.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because my list has 115 shoot dice and an average shot AP of 0.8, which when you think of how many brawlers and commandos there are, it's pretty wild to be at 0.8, but that's thanks to, the weapons teams, the Hulks, the stunt bots and those units.
It's probably similar. You probably have around about 10 weapons that have anti-tank in them, which is what I had. So that's again, playing Forces and Forge Fathers, that's a dream. I can't get anywhere close to that, and they can easily fit in 10.
Yeah, I think I've got 5 units that have anti-tank shooting to varying degrees of capability.
Yes, like 10 dice worth. Sorry. Yeah,
those missile launchers don't put out that many, and you've only got 1 dice per Rainmaker that's anti-tank. So there's not that many dice, but enough to fix problems.
Yep, all I need is 1 to pin.
That's the one.
Alrighty. Overwatch. What things are on the Firefight horizon that's exciting you at the moment?
Well, I don't want to steal Mike's thunder, but I'm pretty excited about something that's happening in January. So that's on the horizon, and it's pretty topical at the moment. So I'll leave that to him.
What's happening in January, Mike?
In January, so we have in Australia we have our Clash of Kings event in January. It coincides with a rather large tournament or gaming convention in Canberra, and this year I'm running the sci-fi version of it. So we're actually going to have one evening of sci-fi to be able to play the Little Brother Dead Zone at that event on the Sunday night, and then on the Monday day of the event, we're going to be running a Firefight tournament there. 1,250 points, three sessions, and there'll be more details being released very shortly on that. Very happy to partner with Matt and the Kings of War community to arrange that coming up.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think it's been called Mantic Mania now instead of the overarching event. And the really cool thing about this, and hats off to you, Mike, is that we've been watching the scene here grow slowly over time. But as soon as we started saying, Mike first posting on Facebook, but I've spoken to a bunch of other people since then as well. A lot of people semi-interested in the game never really jumped in and picked it up. But now that they're hearing that the third day of the Clash event is going to be a Firefight tournament, there's multiple people picking up and starting armies.
If you're already in Canberra, what else is there to do in Canberra?
They're already going to be there, and they've already been thinking about the game. So now I've spoken to 4 or 5 people that hadn't started an army that are now going to start an army.
That's awesome.
So that's awesome. And that's just the people that I've spoken to. So, who knows however many there are.
But you talk to everybody.
Not everybody. How about yourself, Sam?
I guess the thing I'm just thinking about Marauders, looking back at some of the stuff, there's some things I'd love to see come back into the list. I know this isn't actually on the horizon. This is more a wish than a view. I have so many of the Gorons and so on. I'd love to see Gorons make their way back into the Marauders list. One thing the Marauders don't have much of at the moment is the way of chaff troops. The other thing I'd love to see are the Raptors. I was very excited to see in the Epic Warpath Kickstarter that the Marauder faction is going to have Raptors, and oh man, I've got so many Raptors. I would love to see those get back onto the table. At the moment I'm running my Raptors as mules, which is fine, but for those listening who may not be familiar with the Marauder Raptors, they are these older models for the Marauders. They are trikes with enormous fluming exhaust vents coming off the side. They look awesome. I'd love to see them back in the Marauder list. That's
an absolutely awesome model too.
Yeah.
It's a shame that they're not currently in the game because they are a brilliant model.
No, I'd love to see them come in. So not a looking forward, but more a hope.
All right, that brings our episode to a close. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us talk about Marauders as much as we've liked talking about them. So remember to sharpen those ripper claws, load up those missile launchers, and unleash controlled fire.
Hear the tales, fierce and